They told us freedom would come with age. That if you worked hard, stayed disciplined, and kept climbing the ladder, one day, at 65, you'd finally be free. Free to rest, to travel, to enjoy the fruits of decades of sacrifice. Retirement was painted as the promised land, the ultimate reward for a life of loyalty to the system. But what if that picture was never real? What if it was carefully designed to keep you moving, producing, obeying, without ever questioning whether the goal itself was an illusion? For most of us, the roadmap of life was handed to us early. Study hard, get into a respectable job, work for 4 decades, and then retire. That's the script. That's the formula. And almost everyone follows it, rarely asking the simple question, who wrote this story in the first place? The uncomfortable truth is that what waits at the end of this path is not liberation, but confusion. A 2020 study by Stanford Center on Longevity revealed that more than 2/3 of retirees feel lost within 18 months of leaving their jobs. Not because they lack money, but because they've lost their identity. They wake up one morning and realize the role that defined them, the title, the deadlines, the sense of being needed, has vanished. You see, the system never prepared us to live. It prepared us to function. It trained us to be gears in a machine, not human beings outside of it. Retirement, then, is not a reward, but a quiet dismissal. The curtain falls, the spotlight fades, and suddenly you're no longer part of the performance. No script tells you what to do next, and that's when the existential crisis begins. Because who are you without your job title, without the endless meetings, the emails, the responsibilities that gave your life structure? For years, your worth was measured in productivity, not presence. And now that the system no longer needs you, you're expected to suddenly know how to enjoy life, without ever being taught how. The idea of retirement as freedom was never about you. It was about timing your usefulness. It was about phasing you out of the workforce, not handing you the keys to a deeper life. That's the brilliance of the illusion. It doesn't present itself as cruel, it dresses itself up as a gift. But Alan Watts once said, "You are under no obligation to be the person you were told to be." That single sentence shatters the retirement myth. Because if you were never meant to follow someone else's script, maybe retirement isn't the end of your story. Maybe it's the moment you finally realize the book was never written by you at all. And that realization is painful, because it forces you to confront a deeper question. What does it actually mean to be free? If your entire life has been lived waiting for permission to live, were you ever truly alive in the first place? We are taught to delay everything. Joy, rest, self-discovery, as if life only begins when the work is finished. But life has been happening all along, and most of us were too busy preparing for it to notice. So maybe the lie isn't just about retirement. Maybe the real deception is the idea that freedom was something you ever had to wait for. Maybe freedom isn't a destination. Maybe it's a state of being, one that could have been chosen at any moment. But no one told you that, because a truly free human being cannot be controlled. From the very beginning, society industrialized not just labor, but life itself. Starting in the 20th century, human existence was broken down into predictable stages: education, employment, retirement, death. The moment you're born, the path is already mapped. Go to school, follow instructions, find a job, clock in and out for 40 years. Then, if you're lucky, a handful of quiet years before time runs out. But here's what history reveals. Retirement wasn't created as a gift to workers. It was a management tool. In 1889, German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck introduced the first retirement policy, not out of compassion, but to push older, less efficient workers out of the labor force and make space for younger ones. Retirement was economic strategy disguised as benevolence, and slowly society accepted it as truth. The system never asked what kind of life you wanted, it only asked how useful you could be. Your worth became defined by how well you served its needs. You weren't encouraged to ask why you worked, only how hard. You weren't taught to question the rules, only how to fit yourself into them. A 2007 publication from the American Psychological Association, The Retiring Mind, put it bluntly: modern humans rarely design their own lives. They follow templates handed to them. And when you think about it, isn't that what most of us do? We inherit a script, a model, a schedule. We spend our best years working 47 hours a week or more, and rarely pause to ask, what am I actually working for? Who benefits from my labor? The education system trains you for the labor system. The labor system demands your time. And the retirement system discards you when you're no longer efficient. From start to finish, the structure serves productivity, not personal fulfillment. And the most tragic part, most people never resist. Not because they love the system, but because they've never been shown an alternative. When you've lived inside the machine long enough, silence feels like peace. But it isn't peace, it's numbness. The tragedy is that people often don't realize they've been inside a machine until it's too late. Until the noise stops, the rolls end, and they're left staring at the empty space where their life should have been. Because when your entire existence is built on schedules, deadlines, productivity metrics, and imagined future goals, you lose touch with the only reality that ever existed: the present moment. You weren't born to be a cog in an industrial script. You were born to feel, to create, to explore, to connect. But a society built on control has no space for that. So it sells you a version of life that seems safe and respectable while quietly draining your spirit. And this is the question society never wants you to ask. What if the life I've been living wasn't mine at all? The collapse of identity in retirement is devastating. According to the National Institute on Aging, depression rates rise by over 40% in the first year after retirement. And not because of money, but because of identity loss. There's a post on Reddit from a 64-year-old man named John. He had just retired after decades as an engineer at Boeing. His words were simple but heartbreaking. I realized I never actually lived. I just worked. And now that the work is over, I have no idea what to do. John's story isn't rare. It's everywhere. Because when your value is reduced to function, the collapse of that function feels like a quiet death, one that happens while you're still breathing. For years we're told to strive, to achieve, to produce. But no one ever taught us how to exist. So when the striving ends, the silence is unbearable. And here's the cruel trick. Even after you retire, the system doesn't really release you. It simply gives you a new role, not as a worker, but as a consumer. The retirement industry is worth trillions. Cruise lines, insurance plans, retirement communities, all selling you the illusion of freedom neatly packaged as a product. They know you're terrified of chaos, so they sell you comfort. They know you can't live without plans, so they sell you new ones. But it's not liberation they're offering, it's another form of control. You haven't escaped the machine, you've only entered a more polished corner of it. Alan Watts once said, "The desire for security and the feeling of insecurity are the same thing. The more you chase stability, the more fragile you become." True freedom is not found in retirement accounts, vacation brochures, or beachfront condos. It's the ability to see through the illusion, to reclaim your presence. Because life doesn't begin at 65. It doesn't wait until you've earned it. Life is happening now, in the breath you just took, in the silence between thoughts, in the courage to ask, what would it mean to actually live today? Real freedom isn't something you earn after decades of loyalty to a system. It's not a reward for obedience. It's a capacity, a way of being present, fully alive in the time you already have. That begins with redefining who you are, not by your title or your function, but by what moves you, what lights you up, what feels true when everything else falls quiet. Maybe you've spent decades as an engineer, a manager, a provider, but beneath all of that, you've always been something deeper, a creator, a seeker, a soul. So build your life from that center. Create a new rhythm that honors more than just deadlines. Make time for silence, for stillness, for presence. Not to achieve, not to optimize, but simply to be. Because freedom was never a gift waiting for you at the end of a career. It was the simple, radical act of remembering. You never had to wait for it in the first place.